Hi, and welcome to another Unmuted with Marcia. One of the things that we're hearing from you about is the Twitter files, and you want to get to the bottom of it. How did this get started? What is the truth? What do we need to know about the Twitter files? So we have a guest today who truly is a pro and can give us some of that insight and information. Now, Jonathan T. Gilliam is our guest. He has been a Navy SEAL. He's been a police officer. And today we're going to focus on his time as a special agent with the FBI. So Jonathan, welcome so much. I am delighted to have you join us today.
It's good to be with you. And this is a very important issue. I'm glad you're looking into this.
Well, you know, it's so interesting that you see how engaged the FBI appears to be. So when you look at the revelations that are there in the Twitter files, one of the first questions, and one of the questions we've been asked the most is, okay, so if the FBI was doing this and they were holding all these meetings, then what were they not doing? Serious crimes that they should have been focusing on. What did they set aside in order to do this social media content moderation?
Well, it's obvious that they set aside national security. They set aside anything that has to do with Joe Biden or with Hunter Biden's laptop. They set aside a lot of issues over this period of time. And we still don't know exactly when all of this started, which is another, the timeline of this. We only have evidence of what has occurred that has been brought forward by Elon Musk. But I think, if we look back as good investigators and we look back at when the censoring started, we also saw a shift in politics. We saw a shift in the way that the FBI started becoming overtly political, along with the DOJ. So I think, this goes back probably quite a ways where the FBI was involved. I just think they got in the DC office and also in the DOJ, they got a lot more activists in that area, to the point where I've talked to some agents who were working in the DOJ, and they said that upwards way above 70% of the people that they meet were not just liberal, they were far left activist oriented attorneys. And I think, here's a good way to look at it, Senator, is that if everybody's abuzz right now because of the murders in Idaho, right? They sent approximately 40 agents there to work on that. Two behavioral science individuals, evidence response team, and all these other people, and also being tasked all across the United States, wherever this guy was. That's one murder. That's one night with 4 people who were murdered, or one incident, 4 people were murdered. And that's how many people it took to do that. So you can imagine there are literally millions and hundreds of millions of Americans on Twitter alone, not including Facebook, YouTube, Google, all these other social media outlets. And so with that kind of attention, to the point where they can pick out one individual tweet and have that person banned, then they're spending a tremendous amount of time. And quite frankly, I don't know how they're doing it. They must have an outsource, a team of civilians that are picking these things out, probably in some other location where they're actually sifting through these tweets.
Well, and you mentioned other big tech companies. So Jonathan, we have to assume, if we see this with Twitter, and we know that basically they had a war room set up. They did the process there at the Aspen Institute on how to respond to some of this with Hunter Biden. So you have to wonder also what kind of effort and energy was going into the other social media platforms like Facebook and Instagram and YouTube and Google and TikTok and the others.
Well, I think we just don't have the emails to prove what we all have seen. I mean, what Elon Musk has revealed, it's nothing that we didn't feel was happening already. We just didn't have the proof of it. And this is an interesting case, because if this was in a court right now and these things were revealed, we would have real evidence. Or let's say when I was an investigator that this was occurring and we found out this was occurring at Twitter, we would then be able to develop sources and an understanding. And then when we saw this somewhere else, it's the same thing that we do with the mafia, you know, or any other criminal enterprise. We see it happening over there, then it's most likely happening over there as well. And I think with Facebook, Facebook, Google, YouTube is really bad. These people are all intermarried, and I literally mean intermarried, where, you know, their spouses run Google and the other one runs YouTube, but they're also embedded with media. I mean, literally with mainstream media. These people are married to each other, and they have these close-knit relationships and hatred of conservatism, the Constitution, and especially Donald Trump. I mean, they you know, have no problem saying that. So when we look at the totality of the circumstances, which is what we use when we investigate things, you can see it in all of these mainstream social media and media organizations.
You know, Jonathan, one of the things that has been so interesting that we've heard about from our viewers is so many of them will say, okay, did the FBI use a threat, a presumed threat of foreign influence to go in and do content moderation? And then what was the FBI's level of involvement with the social media companies under that pretext of foreign influence? Do you have any insight on that?
Well, we can see, especially based on these emails, that they were using the possibility, or that they had information that Russia was trying to do this or do that in particular. And so it's no different if I task a source and I find out that someone is in the mafia, and I'm just using the mafia, it could be Iran, you know, but we develop a source and we say, we need to get inside here and find this out so that we can stop it. So we go and we develop a source that works in that area, or it exists in that family. And then that source does our bidding. And so what I see when I look at Twitter is exactly how I would run a case if I wanted to develop that for prosecution. We task the source and they go in and do things. But here's the interesting thing is that if I kept saying to this source over and over again, you know, this guy that's in this family is really bad, it would probably help everybody out if they just went away and were killed. And then all of a sudden that person ends up dead. Well, I can assume that my source may have had something to do with that. And so I am guilty of tasking this source, who is an agent of the government, because when we task them, they become an agent of the government. Then that means that the government influenced the decision to kill that person. It's the same here. Whether they are given direct tasking to these individuals, the FBI was giving influence and saying, we recommend that you do this, or that you look at these people. There is no different. And it doesn't matter if it's truth, based on truth or not. We use ruses all the time in the FBI, which are lies, but we go in and we say, we think this is occurring and we would like you to do this. And there's nothing against the law for using a ruse, but when you're suppressing speech, there's a huge problem. And one other thing that they did, if we were working with a criminal enterprise and we took an agent, took them out of the FBI and put them, or undercover, into this criminal enterprise, and then used a source to task the source so he was working with the FBI agent, that's no longer influence. Even if this source is doing things of their own accord, if we have an agent on the inside, we are now controlling that from two different angles, which means the government is in full control of what, in the case of Twitter, what information was pulled down.